Daniel Carter walked through the long hallways of the space station. The walls were made of some kind of metal that seemed to glow with its own light. He had never seen anything like it before. This was his first time visiting a Galactic Council station, and everything looked so different from human technology. The station was huge. It took him 10 minutes just to walk from the docking bay to the meeting rooms. Along the way, he saw aliens from different worlds. Some looked like giant insects with shiny shells. Others were tall and looked like lizards walking on two legs. There were beings that seemed to be made of living rock and others that floated in the air without touching the ground. Daniel was the human ambassador. He had spent years learning about different alien cultures and languages. The job was not easy, but someone had to represent Earth and all the human colonies. Today was the most important day of his career. The peace talks would decide if humans could keep expanding into space, or if they would be forced to stop. Behind him walked Lisa Brooks. She wore a formal military uniform, but Daniel knew she was much more than just a regular captain. Lisa had trained with special forces before joining the diplomatic security team. Her job was to protect the human delegation, but Daniel suspected she had other duties too. The meeting room was enormous. It had seats for over 200 delegates from across the galaxy. The ceiling was so high that Daniel could barely see the top. In the center was a large table shaped like a circle. This was where the main negotiations would happen. Daniel took his seat at the human section. There were only 12 humans at the talks. This seemed very small compared to some of the other delegations. The Thraxian Empire had brought 40 representatives. The Zelkari Collective had 30. Even smaller civilizations had more people than the humans did. Speaker Vorthak entered the room and everyone became quiet. He was the leader of the Galactic Council, and one of the most powerful beings in known space. His species looked like giant snakes, but they could walk upright. His scales were dark green with gold patterns. When he moved, the patterns seemed to shift and change. Vorthak spoke in his own language first. Then a machine translated his words into hundreds of different languages. The human translator made his voice sound cold and mechanical. Daniel wished he could understand the original words. He had a feeling that much was lost in translation. The speaker began the meeting. He explained why they were all here. For the past year, humans had been expanding their territory. They had built colonies on 12 new worlds. They had also started mining operations in 3 star systems. The older galactic civilizations did not like this. According to Vorthak, humans were expanding too fast. They were taking resources that belonged to other species. They were also developing technology without proper supervision. The Galactic Council wanted this to stop. They wanted humans to accept limits on where they could go and what they could do. Daniel listened carefully. He had expected this. Human intelligence had warned him that the Council would try to control human expansion. What surprised him was how direct they were being. Usually, galactic politics involved more subtle approaches. War Chief Krex from the Thraxian Empire stood up to speak. He was over 8 feet tall and covered in thick scales. His voice was so deep that Daniel could feel it in his chest. Krex explained that humans were too young as a species to be trusted with advanced technology. They needed guidance from older and wiser civilizations. The Zelkari representative spoke next. Her name was impossible for humans to pronounce, so everyone just called her Crystal Singer. Her species communicated partly through changing the colors of their crystal-like bodies. The translator had trouble with some of her concepts. She seemed to be saying that humans were disrupting the natural order of the galaxy. Other delegates spoke as well. All of them said basically the same thing. Humans were too primitive and too dangerous to be allowed to expand freely. They needed to accept council authority or face the consequences. Daniel noticed that Lisa was listening to something through a small device in her ear. She was trying to be subtle about it, but he could see her reacting to whatever she was hearing. Commander Jake Sullivan was probably sending her updates from their ship. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he stood up slowly. The room became quiet again. Everyone wanted to hear what the human ambassador would say. Daniel spoke clearly and calmly. He thanked the Council for inviting humanity to these talks. He explained that humans appreciated the wisdom and experience of the older galactic civilizations. But he also made it clear that humanity could not accept the terms being offered. The reaction was immediate. Several delegates started talking at once. Some made sounds that the translators could not convert into words. Daniel could see that many of them were angry. They had expected humans to be grateful for the Council's offer. Crystal Singer's body turned bright red. Daniel had learned that this meant she was very upset. War Chief Krex slammed his large fist on the table. The sound echoed through the huge room like thunder. Speaker Vorthak raised one of his arms and everyone became quiet again. He looked directly at Daniel. His eyes were yellow with black vertical pupils like a snake. When he spoke, his voice was colder than before. The speaker said that humanity was making a mistake. The Galactic Council had ruled this part of space for thousands of years. They had the largest fleets and the most advanced weapons. Humans had only been in space for a few decades. They could not possibly stand against the combined might of the Council. Daniel smiled politely. He had been trained never to show anger or fear during negotiations. Inside, though, he was calculating. Everything was going according to the plan that had been developed back on Earth. Lisa touched her ear again. This time she was not trying to hide it. She turned slightly toward Daniel and nodded once. That was the signal he had been waiting for. The first day of talks ended without any agreement. As the delegates left the meeting room, Daniel could hear them talking among themselves. Many seemed confused. They had expected the humans to back down when faced with superior numbers and technology. Daniel and Lisa walked back toward their quarters. The hallways seemed less impressive now. Daniel was focused on what would happen tomorrow. The real negotiations were about to begin, and the galaxy was about to learn something important about humanity. They had come to these talks hoping for peace, but they had also come prepared for war. The second day of talks started badly. Daniel Carter arrived at the meeting room to find that the seating arrangement had changed. The human delegation was now placed at the far end of the room. They were separated from the main circle where the important discussions would happen. Lisa Brooks noticed it first. She pointed out that this was a deliberate insult. In galactic diplomacy, seating position showed how much respect a delegation received. By moving the humans away from the center, the Council was sending a clear message. Daniel decided not to complain about the seating. He wanted to see what else the Council had planned. Sometimes it was better to let your opponents reveal their true intentions before responding. Speaker Vorthak began the session by announcing new terms. These were much worse than what had been offered the day before. Humanity would have to abandon all colonies built in the last 5 years. They would also have to accept Council inspectors on all human worlds. Any new technology would need Council approval before it could be used. War Chief Krex stood up to add his own demands. The Thraxian Empire wanted humans to pay tribute for the right to travel through space. This tribute would include rare metals and advanced computer systems. Humans would also have to provide soldiers to serve in Council military forces. Crystal Singer from the Zelkari Collective had her own list of requirements. Humans would need to limit their population growth. They were breeding too fast and using too many resources. The Council would decide how many children human families could have. Daniel listened to all of this without showing any emotion. Inside, he was amazed at how arrogant these aliens were being. They seemed to think that humans would accept any terms rather than fight. Dr. Karen Walsh sat beside Daniel taking notes. She was supposed to be a scientist studying alien cultures. In reality, she was gathering intelligence about how each species reacted under stress. Her observations would be very useful in the coming days. Senator Alex Turner was also part of the human delegation. He represented the colonial governments that would be most affected by the Council demands. Alex had been quiet during the first day, but now he was getting angry. Daniel could see him clenching his fists under the table. Commander Jake Sullivan was monitoring everything from the human ship. Through Lisa's earpiece, he was providing constant updates about what was happening in space around the station. The news was not good. 3 large fleets had moved into position around human territory. Each fleet contained hundreds of ships. The Thraxian fleet was known for its heavy weapons and thick armor. The Zelkari fleet used advanced energy shields and particle beams. The third fleet belonged to a species called the Morphani, who specialized in planetary bombardment. The message was obvious. If humans did not accept the Council terms, these fleets would attack human colonies. Millions of people would die and human civilization might be destroyed completely. Captain Tony Mitchell had been studying galactic military tactics for months. He knew that the Council fleets were powerful, but he also knew they had weaknesses. The aliens had become overconfident after centuries of easy victories against primitive species. When Speaker Vorthak finished reading the new demands, he looked directly at Daniel. The snake-like alien seemed very pleased with himself. He clearly expected the human ambassador to surrender immediately. Daniel stood up slowly. The room became quiet as everyone waited to hear the human response. Even the translators seemed to pause as if they were curious about what would happen next. Daniel spoke in a calm voice. He thanked the council for their generous offer, but explained that humanity would need time to consider such important terms. This was not the response anyone had expected. War Chief Krex roared with anger. His massive frame shook as he shouted that humans had no choice in the matter. The fleets were already in position. Human colonies could be destroyed within hours if the council gave the order. Crystal Singer's body turned deep purple, which Daniel knew meant she was confused. The Zelkari had expected humans to beg for mercy or at least try to negotiate better terms. Instead, the human ambassador seemed almost relaxed. Other delegates began talking among themselves. Some seemed angry while others appeared worried. This was not how these situations usually went. Most species became frightened when faced with overwhelming military force. Daniel continued speaking. He explained that humans understood the council's position. The older civilizations had every right to be concerned about new species expanding into their territory. However, humanity also had legitimate interests that needed to be protected. Senator Turner stood up to support Daniel. He pointed out that human colonies had been established legally according to galactic law. The colonists had families and lives that could not simply be abandoned. Any solution would need to respect human rights as well as council concerns. Dr. Walsh added her own observations. She noted that forcing humans to abandon their homes might create more problems than it solved. Angry refugees could become terrorists or pirates. It would be better to find a peaceful solution that everyone could accept. Speaker Vorthak was becoming impatient. He interrupted the human speakers to remind everyone that the council held all the advantages. Humanity was outnumbered and outgunned. They had no choice but to accept whatever terms were offered. Commander Sullivan's voice came through Lisa's earpiece with an urgent update. The council fleets were moving closer to human worlds. Some ships had even entered human star systems. This was clearly meant to increase pressure on the negotiation team. Lisa touched her communication device and sent a coded message back to Sullivan. Daniel saw her do this but did not react. He was waiting for the right moment to reveal what humanity had really been doing while these talks continued. War Chief Krex decided that words were not enough. He activated a holographic display that showed the positions of all Council military forces. The display made it clear that human space was completely surrounded. There was no way for human ships to escape or for reinforcements to arrive. The alien delegates seemed satisfied with this demonstration. They began talking about how to divide up human territory after the conquest. Some wanted to take the mining worlds while others were interested in the agricultural colonies. Daniel listened to all of this with the same polite smile he had worn since the talks began. What the council did not know was that humanity had been preparing for this exact situation. The real surprise was about to begin. Captain Mitchell received a signal from Earth Command. Phase 2 of the operation was authorized. It was time to show the galaxy what humans had really been doing, while everyone thought they were just expanding and building colonies. The peaceful talks were about to become something very different. Daniel Carter looked around the meeting room at all the alien faces staring at him. War Chief Krex had just finished showing the holographic display of council fleets surrounding human space. The message was clear. Humanity was trapped and had no choice but to surrender. Speaker Vorthak leaned forward in his chair. His yellow eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he prepared to deliver what he thought would be the final blow to human resistance. The snake-like alien spoke slowly to make sure every word was understood clearly. The speaker announced that the council had grown tired of human delays and excuses. Humanity had exactly 1 hour to accept the surrender terms. If they refused, the fleets would begin attacking human colonies. The first target would be New Boston, which had over 2 million civilians. Senator Alex Turner jumped to his feet. His face was red with anger as he shouted that threatening innocent people was a war crime. The council had no right to attack civilians who had nothing to do with these negotiations. Crystal Singer from the Zelkari Collective responded by changing her body color to bright orange. Through the translator, she explained that humans were all equally responsible for their species' behavior. There were no innocent humans because they had all benefited from illegal expansion into council space. Dr. Karen Walsh was taking notes, but Daniel could see that her hands were shaking. She was not just recording what was being said, she was also documenting the psychological profiles of each alien leader. This information would be very valuable for what was coming next. Captain Tony Mitchell had been quiet during most of the talks. He was supposed to be a military advisor, but his real job was much more important. Mitchell was coordinating with human forces that the Council did not know existed. Lisa Brooks received another message through her earpiece. Commander Jake Sullivan was reporting from the human ship that several alien vessels were moving closer to the station. The Council was clearly preparing for the talks to fail and for fighting to begin. Daniel stood up and walked to the center of the room. All conversation stopped as the delegates waited to hear the human response to the ultimatum. Some of the aliens looked excited while others seemed nervous about what might happen next. Daniel spoke in the same calm voice he had used throughout the negotiations. He thanked the Council for their patience and explained that humanity had indeed made a decision. However, before announcing that decision, he wanted to share some information that might interest the assembled delegates. War Chief Krex growled that humans had no information that could possibly matter. The Thraxian Empire had been gathering intelligence about human activities for months. They knew exactly what ships humanity had and where those ships were located. Daniel smiled and nodded to Lisa. She activated a small device that projected a new holographic display in the center of the room. This display showed the same star map that Krex had used, but with additional information that made several aliens gasp in surprise. The new display revealed the positions of 17 human ships that had somehow appeared within striking distance of major Council worlds. These ships had been completely invisible to Council sensors until that very moment. Even more shocking was where these ships were located. Admiral Lucy Parker's voice came through the communication system. She was broadcasting from the UES Titan, which was positioned just outside the Thraxian homeworld. Her message was polite, but the implications were terrifying for the alien delegates. Admiral Parker explained that while the diplomatic team had been engaged in peace talks, human military forces had been taking positions throughout Council space. Every major military installation and population center now had a human vessel within weapons range. War Chief Krex roared with rage and disbelief. He demanded to know how human ships had penetrated Thraxian defenses without being detected. Their sensor networks were the most advanced in the galaxy and should have spotted any approaching vessels. Dr. Richard Kim stood up from the human delegation. Until now, he had been introduced as a cultural expert, but his real background was in advanced physics and military technology. Kim activated another display that showed detailed scans of Council fleet compositions and defensive positions. The new information revealed that humans had been monitoring Council communications and military movements for months. They knew the exact location of every ship and the specific capabilities of each vessel. Even more embarrassing for the aliens was that humans had been listening to supposedly secure military transmissions. Commander Helen Davis joined the communication from her position near the Zelkari crystal cities. Her voice was cheerful as she explained that human electronic warfare capabilities were far more advanced than anyone had realized. The sensor networks that the Council was so proud of had been compromised for weeks. Crystal Singer's body turned bright white, which meant she was experiencing extreme shock. The Zelkari had thought their quantum communication systems were impossible to intercept. Learning that humans had been reading their private messages was deeply disturbing. Speaker Vorthak tried to maintain control of the situation. He declared that this was all impossible and that humans must be lying or using some kind of trick. No primitive species could have developed technology advanced enough to fool galactic sensor networks. Captain Mitchell finally revealed his true role. He was not just a military advisor, but the commanding officer of Operation Silent Thunder. This was the code name for the human intelligence gathering mission that had been running parallel to the peace talks. Mitchell explained that humans had taken a different approach to technology development. Instead of trying to match alien energy weapons and shield systems, humans had focused on stealth and electronic warfare. They had also developed kinetic weapons that did not show up on energy-based detection systems. General Paul Roberts transmitted from his position near the Council's primary military academy. His message included detailed information about Council military doctrine and tactical procedures. He knew these things because human agents had been studying at the academy for over a year. The alien delegates began talking frantically among themselves. Some were trying to contact their home governments, while others were demanding explanations from their military advisors. The carefully planned intimidation of humanity had suddenly turned into a nightmare scenario for the Council. Dr. Ben Clark revealed another piece of the puzzle. While aliens had been focusing on grand displays of military power, humans had been quietly placing monitoring devices throughout Council space. Disguised as commercial vessels and research stations, these devices had been gathering intelligence constantly. Commander Nancy Bell reported from her position near the galactic capital. She announced that human agents had successfully infiltrated several government buildings and military installations. They had been collecting information about Council capabilities and weaknesses for months. The meeting room erupted in chaos as the full scope of human preparations became clear. The species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years suddenly realized they had been completely outmaneuvered by newcomers they had dismissed as primitive. The chaos in the meeting room continued as alien delegates tried to understand what had just happened. Speaker Vorthak was hissing orders in his native language, while War Chief Krex was shouting at his military advisors. Crystal Singer had turned completely transparent, which meant she was in a state of total shock. Daniel Carter remained calm in the center of all this confusion. He had expected this reaction from the Council delegates. Human psychologists had studied alien behavior patterns for months and predicted exactly how each species would respond to the revelation. Colonel Steve Adams stepped forward from the human delegation. Until now, he had been introduced as a cultural attaché, but his real background was in military intelligence and psychological warfare. Adams had spent years studying how different alien species thought about conflict and strategy. Adams began explaining the fundamental difference between human and alien approaches to warfare. He spoke slowly, so that the translators could keep up and every delegate could understand his words clearly. The Colonel pointed out that every species in the Galactic Council had achieved dominance through superior technology or overwhelming numbers. Once they became the strongest force in their region, they had stopped innovating and adapting. They had become comfortable with their advantages. Humans were different because they had never been the strongest species on their own planet. On Earth, humans had to compete with other intelligent creatures and even with each other. They had learned to survive through cunning and preparation rather than raw power. Captain Amy Foster joined the communication from her hidden position in the asteroid belt near the Thraxian military shipyards. Her report revealed that human infiltration had been even more extensive than anyone had imagined. Foster explained that human agents had been working inside alien organizations for over 2 years. Some had gotten jobs as technicians and engineers. Others had posed as traders and researchers. A few had even joined alien military forces as volunteers. These agents had not just gathered information. They had also placed monitoring devices and computer viruses throughout Council infrastructure. Every major communication network and computer system had been quietly compromised. Dr. Ben Clark activated another holographic display that showed the true extent of human technological preparation. While aliens had been perfecting energy weapons, humans had developed kinetic projectiles that could punch through any known shield system. The human weapons did not use energy signatures that alien sensors were designed to detect. Instead, they relied on simple physics and incredibly precise targeting systems. A small piece of metal moving at the right speed could destroy even the largest alien warship. Commander Nancy Bell reported from her position inside the galactic capital's communication hub. Her team had been monitoring all Council military communications in real time. They knew about every fleet movement and strategic decision before some alien commanders did. Bell explained that humans had also developed advanced computer viruses specifically designed to target alien systems. These viruses could shut down ship engines, disable weapons, or even take control of entire vessels if necessary. Major Frank White transmitted from his location near the Council's primary intelligence headquarters. His message revealed that humans had been reading classified alien documents for months. They knew about secret weapons projects, military budgets, and even personal information about important leaders. War Chief Krex finally managed to get his communication systems working. He contacted the Thraxian fleet and ordered them to attack the human ship that was threatening his homeworld. The response he received shocked him into silence. Admiral Parker calmly reported that the Thraxian fleet was experiencing technical difficulties. Their navigation systems were malfunctioning and their weapons were offline. The problems had started exactly when human agents activated their computer viruses. The same thing was happening throughout Council space. Alien fleets that had been positioned to attack human colonies were suddenly unable to move or fight. Their own technology had been turned against them by human infiltrators. Crystal Singer tried to contact the Zelkari military through their quantum communication network. She discovered that this system had also been compromised. Human technicians had found ways to intercept and decode messages that were supposed to be impossible to crack. Dr. Sarah Thompson revealed her true role as a specialist in alien psychology and social systems. She had been studying how each council species organized their societies and what would cause the most disruption. With the least actual damage, Thompson explained that humans had identified critical infrastructure points throughout alien space. By targeting communication networks, power systems, and transportation hubs, they could paralyze entire civilizations without killing large numbers of people. The human strategy was designed to minimize casualties while maximizing psychological impact. They wanted to demonstrate their capabilities without starting a war that would devastate both sides. Senator Alex Turner addressed the alien delegates directly. He explained that humanity had no desire to conquer or destroy other civilizations. They simply wanted to be treated as equals rather than as primitives who needed to be controlled. Colonel Linda Johnson had been monitoring alien military communications throughout the crisis. She reported that several council species were already requesting emergency meetings with their leadership. The sudden vulnerability of their homeworlds had caused panic among alien populations. Speaker Vorthak tried to regain control of the situation by threatening to order a full-scale attack on human space. He declared that the council would not be intimidated by human tricks and technology. Commander Jake Sullivan responded from the human ship by activating a demonstration. Every light on the space station flickered as human agents briefly took control of the station's power systems. The message was clear. Humans could shut down the station completely if they chose to. Dr. Richard Kim explained the final element of human preparation. While aliens had been focused on traditional military thinking, humans had studied asymmetric warfare. They had learned how small forces could defeat much larger enemies through superior planning and unconventional tactics. The revelation continued as more human officers reported from their hidden positions. Captain Tony Mitchell coordinated all the reports to show the complete picture of human capabilities and positioning. The alien delegates sat in stunned silence as they realized the true scope of what had happened. The species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers had outmaneuvered civilizations with thousands of years of experience. War Chief Krex slumped in his chair as reports came in from Thraxian space. Human agents had taken control of 3 major military bases and shut down the main fleet communication network. His mighty empire was helpless against an enemy they had never seen coming. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted completely. The peace talks were about to take a very different direction than anyone had originally planned. The meeting room had become completely quiet except for the sound of alien delegates whispering frantically to each other. Daniel Carter stood in the center looking at each species representative with the same polite expression he had worn since the talks began. Speaker Vorthak was the first to break the silence. His voice came out as barely more than a whisper as he asked how long humans had been planning this operation. The snake-like alien seemed to have aged years in just the past few minutes. Daniel explained that human preparations had begun almost immediately after first contact with galactic civilization. Earth's leaders had studied the history of every council species and learned that newcomers were always forced to submit or face destruction. Captain Lisa Brooks stepped forward to address the assembled delegates. She revealed that humanity had never intended for the peace talks to fail. However, they had also never intended to accept subjugation as the price for joining galactic society. War Chief Krex tried one last time to assert Thraxian authority. He declared that even if humans had gained temporary advantages, the Council still controlled most of the galaxy. Eventually, human forces would be found and destroyed. Admiral Lucy Parker's voice came through the communication system with a response that silenced the Thraxian leader. She reported that human sleeper agents had been activated throughout Council space. These agents were not just gathering intelligence anymore, but were prepared to take direct action if necessary. The Admiral explained that every major alien government building, transportation hub, and communication center now had human operatives in position. If the Council chose to continue with military action, these facilities could be shut down or destroyed within hours. Dr. Karen Walsh had been studying alien reactions throughout the crisis. She noted that most species were showing signs of what humans would call learned helplessness. They had been so shocked by the revelation that they were struggling to think of any response. Commander Helen Davis transmitted from her position near the Zelkari homeworld. She announced that human agents had successfully infiltrated the Crystal Cities and could disrupt the entire Zelkari communication network if ordered to do so. Crystal Singer's body had turned a dull gray color, which meant she was experiencing something similar to human depression. The idea that outsiders had penetrated Zelkari society so completely was almost impossible for her to accept. Daniel decided it was time to present humanity's real terms for joining galactic civilization. These terms were very different from what the Council had been offering to humanity. The human ambassador began by stating that humanity wanted peaceful coexistence with all galactic species. However, this coexistence would have to be based on mutual respect, rather than human submission to alien authority. Senator Alex Turner presented the specific details of the human proposal. Humanity would maintain control over all currently occupied territories and would continue expanding at their own pace. No alien species would have the right to limit human population growth or technological development. In exchange, humanity offered to share certain defensive technologies with Council species. They also proposed establishing joint research projects that would benefit everyone. Trade relationships would be open and fair with no special tribute or payments required. Dr. Ben Clark explained the military aspects of the proposal. Human stealth technology and electronic warfare capabilities would remain secret, but humans would help develop better defensive systems for alien worlds. The offer also included a mutual defense agreement. If any Council species was attacked by outside forces, humanity would provide military assistance. However, this agreement would only apply if the Council recognized human sovereignty and independence. Colonel Steve Adams addressed the psychological aspects of the new relationship. He pointed out that the old system of galactic dominance was no longer sustainable. Humans had proven that newer species could develop capabilities that older civilizations never imagined. Commander Nancy Bell reported that alien governments throughout the galaxy were already requesting emergency sessions to discuss the crisis. Some species were calling for immediate acceptance of human terms, while others wanted to continue fighting. War Chief Krex made one final attempt to rally Council resistance. He argued that accepting human demands would encourage other young species to challenge galactic authority. The established order had to be maintained no matter what the cost. Admiral Parker responded by demonstrating exactly what resistance would cost. She ordered a brief shutdown of the Thraxian military communication network. For 10 minutes, the entire Thraxian fleet was unable to communicate with each other or their command structure. The demonstration had its intended effect. Several alien delegates immediately began discussing surrender terms. The idea of having their entire civilization paralyzed was too terrifying to contemplate. Speaker Vorthak finally accepted reality. He announced that the Galactic Council would need time to consider the human proposals. However, he also made it clear that continued military action was no longer an option. Crystal Singer spoke for the first time since the revelations began. Through her translator, she admitted that the Zelkari had underestimated human capabilities completely. Her species was prepared to accept human terms in exchange for guarantees that their communication networks would not be permanently damaged. Dr. Sarah Thompson explained that humanity understood alien concerns about setting precedents for other young species. However, she pointed out that most developing civilizations did not have the same historical background that had shaped human strategic thinking. The negotiations continued for several more hours as details were worked out. The final agreement established humanity as an equal member of galactic civilization, with full rights to territorial expansion and technological development. Captain Tony Mitchell coordinated the withdrawal of human forces from their threatening positions. However, he made it clear that the capability to repeat the operation would remain available if anyone decided to test human resolve. Colonel Linda Johnson announced that human intelligence operations would continue but would focus on external threats rather than monitoring council activities. The message was clear that humanity trusted their new partners but would verify that trust through continued surveillance. The peace talks had succeeded, but not in the way anyone had originally expected. Instead of forcing human submission, the Council had been forced to accept humanity as an equal partner in galactic affairs. As the delegates prepared to return to their home worlds, Daniel Carter reflected on what had been accomplished. Humanity had earned its place in the galaxy not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through superior preparation and strategic thinking. The age of human expansion could now continue without interference. More importantly, humanity had established the principle that galactic civilization would have to adapt to accommodate new members rather than simply forcing them to submit. Commander Jake Sullivan's final report to Earth was brief but satisfied. The mission had been completed successfully and humanity's future among the stars was secure. The galaxy had learned that humans came prepared for any situation, including peace talks that were designed to fail.